Hello and welcome to your Sindarin textbook. I am Dreaming Fifi of RealElvish.net and I will be your teacher today. This is Chapter 2, Elvish Lettering, Lesson 2, Angerthas Daeron. We will be covering the history of the script, vocabulary, the abecedary, the Cirth, and punctuation marks. History of the script. There was one Sindarin elf named Daeron who thought it would be handy to have a writing system, so he invented one made out of straight lines that are fairly easy to carve. The Sindarin elves failed to share in his enthusiasm. The Noldor liked it and expanded on it. The dwarves, however, really took to it. Their modified version is famously known as Dwarven runes. The letters that Daeron made are so vague and can represent so many sounds that we won't learn that series. We'll be learning the series that the Noldor expanded into a working alphabet. We'll need to learn some new vocabulary. The Sindarin word for a rune is Certh, and the plural is Cirth. The Sindarin word for a runic alphabet is Angerthas, or literally a long line of runes. When runes are used for writing Sindarin, they're often called Angerthas Daeron, or Daeron's runic alphabet. And here is the long line of runes. Because this was developed by the Noldor, they made it able to write Quenya sounds as well. Therefore, there's a bunch of Cirth that aren't needed, and they are marked in red. The Cirth marked in green are older and were replaced by other versions. The Angerthas has an abecedary, unlike the Tangar, which have a chart. Even though they are listed rather than charted, the Angerthas are grouped according to the type of sound they represent, because Tolkien's Noldor are linguists. And here are the vowels. Note that the long vowels look quite similar to the short vowels. The E, I, and O come from writing the long vowels as two of the same vowel side by side. Eventually, they were mushed together. You'll also notice that the Y Cirth are just the U Cirth with two dots added. This is because the Y sound developed in Sindarin later than the other vowels. They needed another vowel, so they just added a dot to a similar one. And here are the diphthongs. Many of the diphthongs listed in the Angerthas are used for Quenya, so this list is much shorter than the list in the alphabet. The diphthong AE came from the old diphthong AI, which is why those two symbols are so similar. Also, the diphthong AU, in many cases, came from a long A, which is why it looks similar to the long A Certh. The Cirth for OE and UI are obviously the Cirth for O and E and U and I put on top of each other. The EI Certh closely resembles the older version of E and I put together. And here are the stop consonants. Note that the voiced sounds are given an extra branch similar to the extra luva when writing in Tengwar. This is an Noldorin addition. By the way, the Certh given for the G isn't a mistake. Different Cirth are used for writing Sindarin than are used for writing in English or Dwarvish. Sindarin doesn't make of that famous G, Certh, at all, actually. The fricative consonants. There are more voiceless fricatives in Sindarin than there are Tamar in the Noldorin phonetic chart, so instead of breaking them up, I listed the S and H along with them. The nasal consonants. The long versions of nasals ended up blending with the nasal plus stop consonants, so the same Cirth are used to write them. The older version of Angerthas includes this symbol, which would be used for ngwa. It's not officially part of the Noldorin version, but I wouldn't begrudge someone for using it. Strictly in the Noldorin version, I would say that ngwa would be written this way. The approximate and trill consonants. RH and LH are such rare sounds in Sindarin that they don't get their own Cirth. Use the R Certh for RH and the L Certh for LH. Some consonant combinations, fricatives plus stops or a W. Because I didn't include CHW with the other fricatives, I've included it here. Oddly enough, there is no SD Certh. If you want, you can borrow the letter from the earlier version, which is this. The punctuation system for writing in Sindarin runes is completely different from the punctuation in Latin orthography or in the Tengwar. There are no exclamation points or question marks, parentheses, or quotation marks. There's only periods. A period indicates a pause or an end. The more of them you pile on, the longer the pause or the more end-like it is. One's emotions aren't expressed in punctuation marks. There are usually 6 levels of periods. none, a space, 1 dot, 2 dots, 3 dots, and 4 dots. Here are a few examples. We'll be using the phrase erleth ebent enni, noro. Here are some ways that you can write that. You can write it with space marking the boundaries between words, a single dot marking a pause within the sentence, and then double dots marking the beginning and ends of a sentence. Or you can use no punctuation at all. Or you can put a period between every single letter. And then for the word boundary, you can use a double period, and then a triple period to mark a long pause in the sentence, and then quadruple periods for the beginnings and ends of the sentence. Or you can put 1 period between every word, and then double period for a pause, and then triple periods for the beginnings and ends of a sentence. No matter what you do, just make certain that your usage is consistent throughout a document, and that you have the bigger pauses and more end-like things marked with more periods, and the smaller pauses and the less end-like things marked with fewer periods. The font I used for this lesson is Certh Erebor by Dan Smith. The end. See you in Chapter 2, Lesson 3. No bye.